London, 1934. A thick winter fog coils through Harley Street, muffling the city into a hush as cold as a mortuary drawer. Inside the prestigious clinic of Sir Reginald Ashbury, celebrated surgeon, a body lies unnaturally still, lifeless, collapsed across the mahogany desk. A single surgical scalpel gleams beside him, wiped meticulously clean, and yet there is no blood. Enter Hercule Poirot, summoned discreetly before Scotland Yard arrives, his keen grey eyes absorbing every detail. Something is wrong, terribly wrong, for the room smells faintly, unmistakably, of chloroform. Chapter 1. The corpse in the consultation room, London, in the fading weeks of 1934, was a city wrapped in a shroud of icy fog, the kind that clung to the gas lamps like cobwebs spun from cold breath. Harley Street, the polished corridor of England's elite medical minds, stood eerily silent at this late hour. Only the ceaseless hum of distant motor cars and the dull clatter of carriage wheels punctuated the otherwise sepulchral quiet. Most of the grand red brick clinics had long since dismissed their final patients. Yet, at Ashbury Surgical House, a warm glow still struggled against the creeping fog. The mansion-turned-clinic belonged to Sir Reginald Ashbury, renowned for his unmatched surgical precision, fearsome temperament, and relentless obsession with professional perfection. His clinic was a modern marvel, gleaming steel, pristine tiles, amber lamp fittings, but tonight it felt like a mausoleum. Inside, the silence was broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the long-case clock in the central hall. With each measured tock, the atmosphere grew heavier, as though time itself tiptoed unwillingly toward the night's grim discovery. Hercule Poirot arrived at precisely 8 minutes past 11. His small, immaculate figure emerged from the fog, cane tapping lightly on the stone steps. He paused at the entrance, lifting his head slightly, dark eyes narrowing with instinctive alertness. Something in the air felt wrong. The fog carried not just cold, but tension. He pressed the brass doorbell. A moment later the door opened to reveal Constable Avery, pale, shivering, and clearly out of his depth. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, thank goodness," Avery sputtered. "Inspector Japp said you were coming." Poirot gave a slow nod. "Indeed, mon ami. And I perceive from your expression that the situation inside is, how shall we say, unsettling, yes?" The constable swallowed. "It's not natural, sir. The surgeon, Sir Reginald, he's dead, and the room was locked from the inside." Poirot's moustache twitched faintly. "Locked from within. Ah, an old friend returns. The so-called impossible crime. Show me." They walked through the echoing entrance hall, their footsteps sounding too loud in the stillness. Poirot moved with deliberate steps, eyes scanning everything. The leather benches were perfectly aligned. The umbrella stand held only 2 umbrellas, both dripping with recent use. A coat still hung on the polished wall hook. A fur-trimmed woman's coat, expensive, elegant, unused in hours. He made mental note. Constable Avery led him down a short corridor toward the consultation wing, lit dimly by wall sconces. The deeper they went, the more the faint smell grew, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Poirot sniffed delicately. Chloroform. Avery stopped, startled. "You can smell it, sir." Poirot nodded. "Even beneath cologne. Very expensive cologne. A man of high status and vanity, this Sir Reginald, non?" The constable hesitated as they reached a formidable oak door. "This is the one. We had to force it open after he didn't respond. Bolted tight, deadbolt and all." Poirot crouched beside the lock, touching the metal lightly. "Fresh splintering," he murmured. "So the police forced entry, not earlier." "Yes, sir." Poirot rose. And who discovered he might be in danger? A nurse, Nurse Whitfield. She was waiting outside for nearly an hour, expecting him to sign surgical orders. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. A curious hour for administrative matters. The constable pushed open the heavy door, revealing the room. Poirot inhaled sharply, but silently. Sir Reginald Ashbury sat slumped in his high-backed leather chair, his upper body leaning across the polished desk. One hand dangled limply off the side, the other half buried beneath a sheaf of papers. His silver spectacles lay cracked beneath his cheek, as if he had fallen onto them. His complexion bore an eerie pallor, waxy, drained, almost serene. But the unnatural stillness of his form left no doubt. Poirot approached slowly. The desk lamp glowed dimly, casting elongated shadows across the room. Surgical instruments, Ashbury's pride, hung on the wall like trophies, each gleaming with chilling perfection. But the air smelled faintly, unmistakably, of antiseptic and chloroform. Poirot murmured, "A surgeon surrounded by his tools, yet none show signs of struggle." He examined the body without touching it. No wounds, no blood, yet the pose is unnatural, too carefully placed. He shifted his gaze to the desk. A single scalpel lay beside Ashbury's right hand. The blade shone, polished to a surgical gleam, yet something felt off. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "Not a trace, not a smudge, a surgical instrument that has been too well cleaned." He crouched closer. A scalpel without purpose, placed here for show. Poirot stood. "This is theatre, Constable, a staging of death." Avery blinked. But the door was locked. No one could have entered or left. Poirot smiled softly. "When you say no one, mon ami, you mean no one ordinary. But a murderer of cunning? Ah, that is another matter." He began scanning the room with the precision of a jeweller inspecting diamonds. First the desk, papers scattered, but not randomly. Poirot lifted one sheet. Blank. Every sheet was blank. "Curious," he murmured. "A man who annotates every patient detail leaves blank sheets. No, something was removed." He pulled open the drawer. Empty. Completely. Every compartment. Poirot's eyes narrowed. An empty drawer suggests panic or concealment. He kneeled near the fireplace. A small curl of charred paper lay inside. He teased it out with the tip of his cane. 2 words remained intact. Life insurance. Poirot tucked the scrap into his pocket silently. Behind him, Avery shuffled nervously. "It's almost like someone wanted to erase everything, sir." "Or to keep everything for themselves," Poirot corrected. He scanned the carpet. Near the desk, a rectangular indentation marred the plush weave, the outline crisp. "A chair once stood here," Poirot said, "recently removed. But there are 3 chairs already in the room," the constable said. Poirot shook his head. "No, mon ami. 4. A visitor's chair, the doctor's chair, and 2 matching armchairs. The missing one would complete the set." He tapped the indentation with his cane. "This missing chair is part of our mystery." He rose, turning his attention toward the window. Condensation fogged the glass from within. The latch was firmly secured. "The window is locked. No exit here." Then Poirot examined the door. He touched the bolt latch, observing every detail. Intact, not tampered with, and yet... He ran a finger along the upper trim, toward the transom window, a small rectangular pane above the door, commonly used for ventilation. Poirot nodded slightly. "Ah, interesting. The transom was ajar. Only slightly, but enough. A small person or someone with reach could perhaps lock the door from the outside after leaving." Constable Avery paled. "You mean the murderer set the bolt after escaping?" Poirot tapped the transom. Possibly. Or someone used an object, a long stick, a tool, even the removed chair. He stepped back, satisfied. Then Poirot turned his gaze to the body once more. Sir Reginald's expression was peaceful. Too peaceful. Poirot whispered, "No struggle. A man who fought fiercely against complications in surgery would not go quietly unless—" He looked at Avery. "Constable, summon Inspector Japp immediately. Tell him I suspect poisoning, or more specifically, chloroform administered with precision." Avery stiffened. "Poison! Murder, then!" Poirot tilted his head. Not merely murder. A murder disguised as simplicity, enclosed in the illusion of a locked room. A murderer who counts on the police to assume natural death or self-inflicted demise. He gestured at the desk. A scalpel placed without purpose, papers missing, a drawer emptied, a window sealed, a bolt locked. Poirot's voice softened. This was planned with the mind of a surgeon, or someone intimately familiar with surgical precision. A sound echoed in the hall. Soft footsteps. Poirot and Avery turned sharply. A figure stood just beyond the doorway, hand over mouth, eyes wide with terror. It was Dr. Eleanor Vale, the clinic's anesthesiologist, dark-haired, pale-skinned, elegant, even in panic. You found him," she whispered. "Sir Reginald, dear God." Poirot approached her gently. "Madam, we have indeed, and his death is not as it appears." Dr. Vale swayed, gripping the doorframe. I told him he was overworking. He never listened. I waited for him tonight, but he shut the door. He said he had urgent documents to review. He refused to let me in." Poirot observed every flicker of her expression. "And were you alone in the corridor?" She hesitated. "Yes, of course." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Curious. Nurse Whitfield claimed she waited as well." Dr. Vale stiffened. "Yes, I mean, she left before me. I thought she had gone home." Poirot stored the contradiction silently. She glanced toward the empty drawer. He kept his insurance papers there." Avery raised an eyebrow. "We haven't mentioned a missing document, madam." Dr. Vale froze. Her eyes widened. Too late. Poirot pivoted slightly. "You speak of his insurance. How did you know the drawer was empty?" I assumed—" "No," Poirot said softly. "You knew." Dr. Vale looked ready to faint. He'd been updating them recently. He argued with someone about it. I heard—" Her voice cracked. Poirot stepped closer. "Madame, who was he arguing with?" A flicker of something, guilt, fear, calculation, passed through her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. Poirot studied her long, trembling breath, her trembling hands, and her coat sleeve. The faint scent of chloroform lingered on the fabric. He did not mention it, yet. Instead he asked, "Dr. Vale, who else was here tonight?" She exhaled shakily, but Poirot sensed deflection. Dr. Marsh was in the operating theatre. Clara, Lady Ashbury, visited earlier, but she left before dinner. Pennington, the accountant, was in the financial office. That is all. Poirot inclined his head. "Merci." He turned away, pretending to study the window. But his mind clicked sharply. A missing chair, a forced door, an oddly peaceful corpse, a scalpel too clean, an empty drawer, a burned insurance paper, a coat sleeve with chloroform residue. A statement delivered too quickly. Knowledge she should not possess, and then— A sudden gasp echoed behind them. Nurse Whitfield stood in the hallway, eyes bulging with horror, not at the body, but at something else entirely. She pointed at the desk. "The drawer! It was full when I last saw it. His documents, they're gone." Dr. Vale flinched violently. Poirot saw everything. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the room settle around him. Then, softly, "The murderer has already begun to betray themselves." A shadow moved in the corridor. And with that, Chapter 1 ends with the quiet certainty that one of the 4 people in this clinic tonight is a killer. Chapter 2. Shadows of Motive and Deceit. Hercule Poirot stood in the centre of Sir Reginald Ashbury's consultation room as if he were its axis, small, composed, immaculate, while chaos, suspicion and fear rotated around him. The corpse remained in its unnatural serenity. The fog outside pressed against the window like a quiet, patient spectator. Inspector Japp arrived in his usual brisk manner, coat flapping, moustache bristling with irritation and cold. "Well, Poirot," he muttered, rubbing his hands together, "you've dragged me out at the devil's hour. This better be good." Poirot inclined his head. "Mon ami, I think you will find the night's work most stimulating." Japp stepped toward the body. "Heart attack? Stroke? He doesn't look strangled. Looks more like natural death than murder." "Ah," Poirot murmured, "but natural death does not remove documents, nor burn insurance papers, nor lock doors from the outside." Japp froze. "Locked room? Oh, for Poirot, can't we have one simple case this week?" Poirot allowed himself a small smile. "Alas, my friend, murderers rarely oblige the wishes of the police." He motioned toward the transom window. "Our killer counted on the illusion of impossibility to delay suspicion. We must not grant them that satisfaction." Japp sighed heavily. "All right, then. Show me the players." Poirot nodded once, then stepped aside as Japp signalled Avery to summon everyone present in the clinic. Within minutes, 4 figures stood in the clinic's reception hall, each under its own cloud of dread, guilt, or guarded innocence. 1. Dr. Eleanor Vale, the anesthesiologist, delicate, intelligent, elegant, and trembling. Her eyes were rimmed red, though Poirot could not determine whether from grief, fear, or something darker. 2. Nurse Margaret Whitfield, 35. Strict posture, lips pursed with moral judgment. A woman who had served the clinic for 12 years without a single infraction. She clutched her nurse's cap in both hands as though it were a lifeline. 3. Dr. Adrian Marsh, the junior surgeon. Charming, handsome, with an arrogance he attempted and failed to hide. His blonde hair was tousled, his jaw tight. Poirot noted the faint smell of surgical disinfectant and nervous sweat. 4. Thomas Pennington, the clinic's accountant. Thin, anxious, spectacles perched precariously on his nose. He looked like a man who had been living in fear for quite some time. A 5th name hung over the group like a phantom, Lady Clara Ashbury. Absent, yet very present in everyone's eyes. Poirot stepped forward. "Mes amis, I regret to inform you formally, Sir Reginald Ashbury is dead." A collective gasp rippled through the group. Dr. Marsh whispered, "Dead, but he was in perfect health," Nurse Whitfield interrupted sharply. "He was working himself into the grave. None of you listened." Dr. Vale closed her eyes. Pennington wiped his glasses rapidly. He had many enemies. I mean, professional pressures." Poirot lifted a hand. "Please, you will each speak in turn. But first, I must ask that no one leave this building. Inspector Japp and I will require statements." Japp stepped beside Poirot, folding his arms. "And cooperation, every one of you." The suspects exchanged glances. Fearful, resentful, calculating. Poirot observed each expression with surgical precision. Poirot began with the one who seemed closest to unravelling. He led Dr. Vale into the smaller waiting room. Quiet, dim, with soft lamplight illuminating her pale face, she sat stiffly, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on an unseen point. "Dr. Vale, Poirot began gently. "You were the last to see Sir Reginald alive, yes?" She swallowed. "Yes. I waited outside his door. He said he had urgent papers. He seemed distracted, unwell." Poirot tilted his head. "You did not find his behaviour unusual?" "No more than usual." She offered a weak smile. "Sir Reginald was often abrupt." Poirot paced slowly. "And what was your relationship with him?" Her breath caught. "We worked together professionally." Poirot turned. "Professionally only." A long silence. Finally, she whispered, "He was a complicated man." Poirot waited. "He relied on me," she continued, "on my steadiness, on my discretion." She looked away. "But he demanded too much. He could be cruel, emotionally cruel." "Were you two involved?" Her eyes flashed. "No, I would never compromise myself like that." Poirot noted the flicker of anger. "Then tell me, madame, why does your sleeve carry the faint scent of chloroform?" Her face drained of colour. "Chloroform? I was preparing the theatre earlier. For tomorrow's operation, that's all." "Yet the theatre shows no signs of activity since late afternoon." She stiffened again. Poirot leaned slightly closer. "You also knew the contents of the empty drawer. You spoke of insurance papers before anyone mentioned them." She swallowed hard. "He confided in me last week. He said he was updating his beneficiaries." "And who were the beneficiaries?" She hesitated. "I don't know." Poirot saw the lie as clearly as a crack in glass. He dismissed her gently but firmly. There was fear in her walk, deep fear, but fear alone is not guilt. Dr. Marsh entered with forced confidence, chin raised slightly. "Let's make this quick," he said. "I've got a morning surgery." Poirot smiled politely. "Not any more, I fear." Marsh reddened. "I didn't mean, look, Sir Reginald was a mentor to me." Poirot examined him. "A mentor you admired?" Marsh hesitated. "I admired his skill, but not the man." Marsh exhaled. "He could be impossible, overbearing. He ruined careers as easily as he built them, mine included." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Ruined." Marsh clenched his jaw. "He threatened to revoke my surgical privileges last week. Claimed I botched a procedure. Nonsense. He wanted control. Always control." Poirot considered this. "And where were you tonight?" "In the theatre, checking equipment." "Alone?" "Yes." Poirot paused. "You have broad shoulders, Dr. Marsh, strong arms. Are you capable of lifting a man or a chair?" Marsh narrowed his eyes. "Are you accusing me of something?" Poirot smiled. "I accuse no one. I merely seek clarity." "Then seek it elsewhere," Marsh snapped. "Sir Reginald made enemies, but I didn't kill him." Poirot dismissed him. But he noted the bitterness. Deep, festering, dangerous. Nurse Whitfield stood at attention, hands folded. "Madame," Poirot said, "you served Sir Reginald for 12 years." "Yes, sir." "You saw him today?" "Yes." "He was short-tempered, agitated, but he was always so before his late-night paperwork." "Was anyone else with him?" "No, sir. Only Dr. Vale earlier, and Pennington came asking for signatures." Poirot nodded slowly. "And what did you see when you waited outside the door tonight?" She swallowed. "He refused to speak to me. He said he was busy. And then the room went quiet. Too quiet." "You remained there?" "For 40 minutes." Poirot frowned. "Dr. Vale said she was waiting there also, after you left." Nurse Whitfield stiffened. "I never left. She's lying." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And why would she lie?" Nurse Whitfield hesitated. "Because she hated him." "Hated?" Nurse Whitfield clasped her cap tighter. "He humiliated her last week. A disagreement over anesthesia dosage. He shouted at her in front of the staff. She was shaking." Poirot dismissed her, troubled. Pennington entered with the air of a man entering a courtroom. He spoke rapidly. I had nothing to do with this, nothing. Poirot soothed him. Calm yourself, monsieur. You are among friends. Friends don't accuse each other of murder. Poirot raised a brow. Ah, then your conscience is troubled? Pennington stuttered. No, but Sir Reginald he was impossible, demanding, suspicious. He thought I was stealing from him. Poirot paused. And were you? Pennington flushed crimson. No, but the clinic finances are strained. He refused to listen to reason. Poirot stepped closer. You visited him tonight? Yes. Pennington wrung his hands. I needed his signature on payroll documents. He dismissed me. Told me to return at midnight if I wanted his attention. Poirot tilted his head. And did you return? No, of course not. Another lie. Poirot felt it. He dismissed the trembling accountant. Poirot turned to Japp. I must speak with Lady Clara. Japp nodded grimly. The maid says she left the clinic at 8 and hasn't returned home. Missing? Not yet, but close. Poirot's moustache quivered. A wife absent at the time of her husband's death is either innocent or very much not. Japp grunted. You don't think she... Poirot shook his head slightly. I think she knows more than she allows. But whether she is murderer, accomplice, or victim of circumstance, we shall see. Alone again in the consultation room, Poirot began to reconstruct the final hour of Sir Reginald Ashbury. He stood behind the chair, mimicking the surgeon's last posture. He sits. He reviews documents. Someone enters. Poirot glanced at the indentation on the carpet. Someone who brings a chair removed after the deed. He studied the scalpel, placed deliberately, no fingerprints, a message, or a misdirection. He approached the fireplace. Insurance documents, burned. Why? He examined the latch again. Locked from outside. Then he saw it. A faint streak on the floor, almost invisible. He knelt, a tiny droplet, round, amber-coloured. Poirot dipped a gloved finger. He sniffed. Perfume! Lady's perfume! He straightened, eyes blazing with clarity. Not chloroform, perfume, in a place it should not be. He pivoted toward the door, and froze. The missing chair had been returned, quietly, stealthily, while he was in the hall. Someone had re-entered the room during the interviews. Poirot approached the chair, brown, polished, identical to the others, but the legs bore faint scrape marks. Mon Dieu, he whispered, and there are threads, fine, silk. A woman's dress, or scarf. He was not alone. He turned toward the corridor. A shape flickered past the frosted glass window. Then, a scream, shrill, terrified, echoing through the clinic. Poirot and Japp rushed out. Nurse Whitfield stood at the end of the hallway, hands to her mouth. What happened? Japp barked. She pointed, trembling violently. Dr. Vale, she's gone. Gone? Poirot repeated. Nurse Whitfield nodded frantically. Her coat is missing. Her bag is gone. And look. She pointed to the side exit door. The deadbolt hung loose. For the second time tonight, a door had been tampered with. Poirot felt a cold certainty settle into his bones. Mes amis, he whispered, our murderer attempts escape. Japp cursed. Get men at every exit! Poirot stared down the dark corridor. If Dr. Eleanor Vale was fleeing, she was either terrified of being accused or running because she was the killer. But Poirot's instincts whispered something more dangerous. The murderer was crafting yet another illusion. Chapter 3. The Surgeon's Shadow. The following morning dawned grey over Harley Street, a thin winter light diffusing through a curtain of mist that curled around the lampposts like restless spirits seeking warmth. Hercule Poirot, resolutely immaculate even at such an early hour, arrived outside Dr. Alistair Crowden's clinic with a brisk tap of his cane on the pavement. The building stood silent, its stone facade betraying nothing of the violent death that had transpired within its walls. By 8 o'clock, Inspector Hastings, tall, sandy-haired, and looking as though he had scarcely slept, hurried to meet him. "Morning, Poirot. You're early," he muttered, tugging on a pair of gloves. Poirot raised a brow. "But naturellement. A man who wishes to catch the fox must arrive before the fox has dressed for the day, n'est-ce pas?" Hastings blinked. "Do foxes?" Poirot held up a hand. "It is a metaphor, mon ami. Très délicate. Allow it to do its work." They entered the clinic, the faint antiseptic scent mingling with the cool morning air. A nurse stood waiting. Nurse Evelyn Grange, a slim woman in her 30s with pale eyes and a habit of biting her lip. "Monsieur Poirot." "I'm he. The staff are assembled in the consultation room. Inspector Hale has given permission for your, methods." Poirot smiled faintly. "My methods, mademoiselle, consist only of the observation and the little grey cells. Let us proceed." The consultation room contained 4 individuals. Dr. Henry Markham, the clinic's junior surgeon, Nurse Jackie Hollis, stout and red-cheeked, Mr. Lionel Carfax, the clinic's administrator, and Miss Lydia Crowden, the victim's sister, upright and severe as a marble statue. Poirot took a seat at the head of the table, steepling his fingers. "We shall begin," he said softly, "at the start. Dr. Crowden was last seen alive at 7:30 yesterday evening. He was found murdered, struck upon the temple, yes? Sometime after 9. I would like each of you to describe your activities during that period, in your own words." There was a moment of stillness, broken only by the ticking of a brass clinic clock. Dr. Markham went first. "I was finishing patient paperwork. I left at 8 precisely." His voice trembled slightly. Hastings noted it. Poirot noted everything. Nurse Jackie Hollis folded her hands. "I was stocking supplies until 7:30. Then I caught a taxi home." Lionel Carfax cleared his throat. "I left early, a dinner engagement." Miss Lydia Crowden's expression did not change. "I was at home. My brother dined out that evening, or so I believed." Poirot tilted his head. "You say, or so you believed. Why the uncertainty, mademoiselle?" She hesitated. He sent a note that he would not return until late, but I found it curiously vague. Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Curiously vague. Bon, we shall return to that." Poirot requested to see Dr. Crowden's private office once more. Inspector Hale accompanied them reluctantly. "You've been through this room already, Poirot. What more do you expect to find?" Poirot gave an airy shrug. "Something that you, mon brave Hale, would dismiss as unimportant." He began his slow, deliberate walk. 10 seconds, 20, 30. At the 42nd second, the moment Poirot always claimed separated the amateurs from the artistes, he stopped abruptly. On the edge of Crowden's desk lay a leather-bound notebook titled Patient Ledger C. Poirot flipped through it, then stopped at one page where a line of ink seemed oddly smudged. The name had been blotted intentionally. Poirot leaned in. Someone attempted to hide one name, but only one. Hastings frowned. "What does that signify, Poirot?" "That, Hastings, is precisely the question." He produced a small magnifying lens from his pocket. "Observe, the ink beneath the smear is midnight blue, but the ink around it is black. 2 pens, 2 entries, 1 erased." Poirot closed the book gently, as though tucking a child into bed. This was no casual act. Someone removed the identity of a patient Dr. Crowden saw yesterday afternoon. Inspector Hale stiffened. "Could be unrelated." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Nothing in a murder investigation is unrelated." As they prepared to leave, the clinic door chimed softly. A woman entered, short, elegant, wearing a green cloche hat and an expression of barely contained tension. "Forgive me," she said breathlessly. "Is it true? Dr. Crowden is dead?" Her voice carried a tremor that was not entirely grief. Poirot stepped forward. "And you are, madame? I am Mrs. Rosalind Fairbairn. I was one of Dr. Crowden's patients." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Recently?" "Yes, yesterday afternoon." Hastings exchanged a look with Poirot. The missing entry, the blotted-out name. "Madame Fairbairn," Poirot said gently, "I believe you have come at a very important moment. Might we speak privately?" The woman hesitated, then nodded. Inside the consultation room, her poise dissolved. "I cannot have my name associated with the scandal," she said, twisting a handkerchief. "My husband is a member of Parliament. If he knew I visited Dr. Crowden—" "For a medical consultation?" Hastings asked. Her silence was answer enough. Poirot's voice remained calm. "You feared blackmail?" Her head snapped up. "Yes, Dr. Crowden. He hinted that my visits could become public knowledge unless I was cooperative. He was not the gentleman people believed." Poirot studied her expression. Not frightened, furious. "What did you do, madame?" "I argued with him yesterday at 5. We had words, heated ones," she swallowed. "But I did not kill him." After she left, Poirot and Hastings walked the clinic corridor once more. Poirot stopped near a window ledge, inspecting a faint trace of something on the polished wood. "Hastings, mon ami, what do you see?" Hastings squinted. "A bit of dust?" Poirot sighed. "It is surgical talc, used for gripping gloves." "And what of it?" Poirot straightened, his gaze gleaming. "It is found only in the surgical theatre. Yet here it lies in the corridor, outside the office of a dead man." Hastings's eyes widened. Someone wearing surgical gloves visited Dr. Crowden just before he was killed. Poirot nodded. And not just anyone. Someone who knew where the talc was kept, and who handled it as second nature. A surgeon, or someone desperate to appear as one. Poirot's voice grew soft, almost reverent. "Mon ami, the circle tightens." Chapter 4. Confession in the Theatre. The surgical theatre of Dr. Crowden's clinic was a cold, silver-lit sanctum, every surface polished to a sterile gleam. The circular overhead lamp hung like a mechanical moon, illuminating the room with a harsh clinical brightness. Against the far wall, the door shuddered under a frantic series of knocks delivered by Inspector Hastings. "Dr. Markham, open the door at once!" A strained voice escaped from within. "No, no, please! I need a moment, just a moment." Poirot raised a hand requesting silence. He leaned close, his words calm and smooth. "Dr. Markham, it is Hercule Poirot who requests entrance. You wished to speak to us, did you not? Then open the door, s'il vous plaît." A beat, a shaky breath, a metallic click. The door opened a crack, then fully. Dr. Henry Markham stood there in his surgical coat, his eyes wild, his face streaked with tears he did not attempt to hide. The young surgeon collapsed onto a stool beside the operating table, burying his face in trembling hands. Poirot approached slowly. "You are distressed, mon cher docteur. Perhaps you shall tell us why." Markham lifted his head. "I can't keep it in any longer. The guilt, good God, the guilt, it's crushing me." Hastings stiffened. "Are you confessing to the murder?" Markham shook his head violently. "No, not murder, but I did lie. Yesterday, to protect myself." Poirot gestured gently. "Begin at the beginning." "I owed Crowden money," Markham whispered. "A great deal of money, gambling debts, ones I hid from the clinic board. Crowden found out months ago. He promised to keep my secret if I repaid him." "And you could not," Poirot said softly. Markham nodded. "He threatened to expose me. Ruin me. Yesterday evening, I went to his office after hours. I meant to beg, for time, for mercy, anything. Hastings swallowed. What happened? Markham's eyes filled again. He dismissed me, called me pathetic, told me my resignation letter would be drafted by morning. And after this, Poirot asked. I left. At 8, I swear it. I never saw him again. Poirot tilted his head. And yet you locked yourself in the theatre. Pourquoi? Markham's gaze darted to the metal tray beside him. Surgical implements lay there in rigid alignment. Scalpels, forceps, clamps, all gleaming under the light. Because, he whispered, Crowden kept a private ledger on all of us. He wrote everything down. Blackmail material, patient secrets, personal weaknesses. I thought, perhaps he wrote something about me, something incriminating. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. Aha! The missing entry. Markham's brows pinched. Missing entry? I don't understand. Poirot gave a tight smile. Then it is not you who blotted out the name. Poirot's gaze drifted to the surgical tray. A small object caught his eye. A scalpel, perfectly clean, but lying slightly apart from the others, angled unusually. He lifted it delicately. This instrument, it has been placed back in haste. Markham blinked. No one used that tray last night. I sterilized it myself before I left. Poirot turned the scalpel over. On its handle, almost invisible, a faint fingerprint gleamed in the harsh light. Not Markham's, someone else's. Poirot replaced it. With your permission, I shall have this dusted. Markham nodded numbly. A sudden tap at the frosted theatre window startled them all. Nurse Evelyn Grange stood outside, pale. Monsieur Poirot, the administrator, Mr. Carfax. He says he has something urgent to report. Poirot's moustaches twitched. But of course he does. He turned to Markham. One last question, Docteur. Did you see anyone in the corridor after you left Crowden's office? Markham hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I saw someone near the storeroom, someone who shouldn't have been there. Who? Hastings demanded. Markham swallowed. Miss Lydia Crowden. Poirot's brows rose. Dr. Crowden's sister. Yes. She looked nervous, startled to see me. She said she was searching for a misplaced document, but she was nowhere near the administrative files. Poirot's voice took on a soft purr. Très intéressant. Mr. Lionel Carfax was pacing the hallway when they returned, wringing his hands, his spectacles askew. Poirot! Inspector! I must speak at once. Poirot nodded. Proceed, monsieur. Carfax thrust a small envelope into Poirot's hand. This arrived this morning, delivered by messenger, addressed to the clinic. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside was a single sentence, written in hurried, slanted handwriting. What he knew will be your death as well. Hastings exhaled sharply. A threat? Carfax nodded miserably. I don't know who it's meant for, me perhaps, but this handwriting, it looks feminine. Poirot tapped the envelope thoughtfully. Or perhaps made to appear feminine, monsieur. One must be cautious. Carfax leaned in. You understand, Poirot. The clinic's reputation cannot withstand scandal. If Crowden was blackmailing patients, donors, we could lose everything. Poirot fixed him with a sharp, assessing look. You seem notably concerned with your own downfall, monsieur. Carfax's cheeks flushed. Well, any administrator would be. Poirot nodded, slowly, though the suspicion remained in his eyes like a needle's glint. Back in the corridor, Hastings rubbed his forehead. This is a mess, Poirot. Everyone here seems to have motive. Markham, Lydia, Carfax, even that Mrs. Fairborn you spoke with. Poirot smiled. Oui, mon ami. The motives are plentiful, but only one person had the opportunity. And who is that?" Poirot looked toward the far end of the clinic's main hall, where Nurse Evelyn Grange was returning to her station, her steps oddly hurried. He murmured, "Opportunity, Hastings, always hides in the shadows of routine." Hastings frowned. "What do you mean?" Poirot began to walk, hands behind his back. The surgical talc in the corridor, the fingerprint on the scalpel, the missing ledger name. He paused, and now the letter of threat. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I begin to see the outline of the truth." Hastings stared. "You mean you know already?" Poirot nodded once. "Not the entire picture, but the edges. Soon the painting shall be complete." Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the stairwell. A voice called urgently, "Monsieur Poirot, come quickly." Poirot turned. It was Nurse Jackie Hollis, breathless, terrified. It's Miss Lydia Crowden. She's collapsed in the waiting room, and beside her is blood." Poirot's eyes flashed. The case, it seemed, had taken its next victim. Chapter 5. Lydia's Fall. The waiting room of Crowden's clinic, usually a sanctuary of hushed voices, ticking clocks and discreet discomfort, had transformed into a scene of controlled alarm. The morning light filtered through frosted windows, pale and cold, pooling across the tiled floor, where Lydia Crowden lay slumped in a chair, her posture rigid as if frozen mid-movement. Poirot arrived first, followed closely by Hastings. Nurse Jackie Hollis hovered above Lydia, wringing her hands with a near-audible panic. "I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I found her only moments ago. She was gasping. Then she fainted, and this was on her lap." She pointed to the small smear of crimson staining Lydia's white glove. Hastings blinked. "Good Lord, is it Crowden's blood?" Poirot knelt beside Lydia, his gaze narrowing as he examined the gloved hand. He lifted it gently, scrutinizing the single line of blood, a streak, long and thin, not splattered. "No," Poirot murmured, "this is fresh." At that exact moment, Lydia's eyelids fluttered open. She drew a sharp breath. Her voice, when it emerged, trembled with controlled fury. "Who touched my brother's office?" Poirot straightened. "Mademoiselle, I assure you everything done has been in pursuit of the truth." Lydia stared at him, her normally composed expression cracking ever so slightly. "I warned him," she whispered, barely audible. "I begged him to stop, but he wouldn't listen." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Begged him? To stop what, mademoiselle?" She closed her eyes. A single tear escaped. "Ruining lives," Poirot gestured toward Hastings. "Bring her water, mon ami." As Hastings hurried away, Poirot turned his attention to Lydia's handbag, which sat open, its contents spilled in her moment of collapse. A small ivory envelope protruded from within. No wax seal, only her brother's initials, AC, written in a familiar, firm cursive. "May I?" Poirot asked softly. Lydia nodded, defeated. Poirot slid out the letter. Inside was a single sheet bearing her brother's handwriting. "Lydia, if anything should happen to me, know that the truth lies not in my office, but in what I dared not record." AC. Poirot inhaled sharply through his nose. "Très intéressant." Hastings returned with water, his eyes wide. "What does it mean?" Poirot tapped the paper with his fingertip. "It means, mon ami, that Dr. Crowden feared for his life." Lydia stiffened. "He received threats, anonymous letters. I begged him to go to the police, but he said it would compromise the confidentiality of his patients and his position." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And did he confide in you the identity of his enemy?" Lydia hesitated. "Yes, in a manner." Poirot leaned closer. "Mademoiselle, now is the time to speak clearly." She swallowed. "He told me there was someone in the clinic, someone he trusted, who had betrayed him, someone who feared Crowden knew too much. Hastings exhaled. "This clinic is crawling with suspicion, Poirot." Poirot touched Lydia's arm gently. "Tell me, mademoiselle, why the blood?" She looked at her glove. "It's not mine. It was on the handle of my brother's desk drawer when I opened it this morning." Poirot's posture sharpened instantly. "You entered his office again?" "I had to. His personal papers. They were disturbed. Someone had searched them overnight." Poirot turned to Hastings. "Then the intruder has returned." Poirot helped Lydia sit upright. "Mademoiselle, what did you find?" She reached into her bag and withdrew a folded photograph. "I found this, hidden in the false bottom of his drawer." Poirot took the photograph gently. It displayed Dr. Crowden standing beside a young woman in a nurse's uniform. Her face was delicate, her expression solemn, but unmistakable. Nurse Evelyn Grange. Hastings frowned. "Crowden and Nurse Evelyn. I thought she barely spoke to him." Poirot studied the photograph. "The posture, Hastings, the angle, the stiffness. This is not a portrait of lovers, it is a portrait of secrets." He flipped the photograph over. A date, a single line of ink, and a signature. "For your eyes only, E.G." Poirot's breath caught. Mon Dieu! Before Hastings could question him, a shout echoed from down the hall. "Poirot! Inspector!" It was Inspector Hale, running toward them with uncharacteristic alarm. "You'd better come quickly. The theatre room. Someone smashed the sterilization cabinet." Hastings paled. "A break-in. Now?" Poirot pocketed the photograph calmly. "Not a break-in, Hastings. A desperation. The killer grows frantic." They followed Hale, Lydia trailing behind despite Poirot's warnings to rest. When they reached the theatre, shards of glass littered the floor. A set of sterile instruments had been disturbed, some missing. Markham stood in the corner, shaken. "I heard it," he stammered. "Someone was here, just moments ago. They escaped through the back corridor." Hale pointed to the door. "The lock's broken. Whoever it was forced their way out." Poirot knelt again among scattered fragments, his eyes narrowing. "Look closely," he murmured. Hastings bent beside him. "What am I looking for?" Poirot lifted a single glove from the mess. A surgical glove dusted with talc. Inside it, a faint reddish smear. Blood, but not just any blood. Poirot's eyes widened slightly. The smear was the same shape, long, thin, streaked, as the one on Lydia's glove. Matched perfectly. He stood abruptly. "The killer is tying loose ends," he said, voice low, "and Mademoiselle Lydia was meant to be one of them." Hastings stiffened. "You mean she was attacked?" Poirot nodded once, or frightened into silence, but their attempt failed, and now, his expression hardened. Now the killer grows reckless. He turned to Hale. "Inspector, seal every exit. No one leaves this building." Hale frowned. "You think the murderer is still here?" Poirot's moustaches twitched upward, like the blade of a knife. "But of course they are. They have no choice. Their secrets live within these walls." He looked toward the corridor leading to the nurse's wing. "And one of those secrets," he whispered, "belongs to Nurse Evelyn Grange." Chapter 6. The Whispering Walls of Harley Street. Hercule Poirot arrived at Harley Street shortly after 9 the next morning, his shoes immaculate, his moustaches stiff with purpose, and his eyes glinting with the sharp, feline awareness of a hunter who sensed his prey drawing nearer. The winter sun slanted across the row of medical offices, each dignified building standing in prim silence like an assembly of physicians at an academic tribunal. Yet today Poirot felt a tremor beneath the facade of respectability. Somewhere within these powdered brick walls, a truth struggled to break free. Chief Inspector Japp, leaning against the iron railing, greeted him with a grunt. "Morning, Poirot. Thought you'd want to be here early." The locksmith opened Dr. Blackwell's private records cabinet, and mon Dieu, it's a mess. Poirot ascended the steps. "A mess, my friend, often conceals the most enlightening of patterns." Inside, the surgery felt even colder than before, as if the building mourned the brutal end of its master. The antiseptic scent was fainter today, replaced by the dusty smell of paper disturbed and drawers pried open. Nurse Edith Vale stood stiffly by the window, a handkerchief clutched in both hands. She avoided meeting Poirot's eyes. "You wished," she began, but her voice cracked. She pressed the handkerchief to her lips. Poirot approached gently. "Mademoiselle, courage. We shall require but a few moments more of your assistance." He motioned her to sit before turning his attention to the cabinet Japp had mentioned. The heavy oak drawers bore no external signs of tampering, remarkably so, for they had certainly been breached. Poirot ran a gloved finger along the edge, studying the faintly disturbed layer of dust. Someone opened this, closed it, and attempted to disguise their entry. The dust is brushed in one direction only. A hurried job? None? Japp nodded. And worse, someone burned papers in the fireplace last night. The charred scraps are hardly readable. Poirot knelt before the hearth. Amidst the ashes, the faint outline of a typed page survived, the letters warped but not destroyed. Carefully, he lifted the fragment with silver tongs. "Contraindicated. Patient exhibiting progressive instability. Reconsider operation," Poirot murmured. Nurse Vale inhaled sharply. "That is Dr. Blackwell's notation style. He must have written this for one of his patients, but he rarely recommended against an operation. He believed in intervention." Poirot's head tilted. Even when the patient should not be operated upon? Her face blanched. I do not know. Perhaps sometimes he pushed too far. His ambition was," she hesitated, "uncompromising." Japp muttered, "So someone didn't want us to see this report. Question is, why?" Poirot dusted off his knees and turned to the nurse. "Mademoiselle Vale, may I ask, was Dr. Blackwell recently preparing for a particular surgery? Something unusual?" Her hands trembled in her lap. "Unusual? Yes, very," she swallowed. "Lady Charlotte Ashdown. The appointment was scheduled for next week." Japp's eyebrows shot up. "Ashdown? As in the Ashdown Endowment?" "The very same," Nurse Vale whispered. "She is a patron of the medical sciences, and she has been ill for some time." Poirot stepped closer. "Mademoiselle, what was the nature of her condition?" Nurse Vale hesitated again. Poirot observed the subtle flicker in her eyes. Fear mingled with loyalty. "It is confidential," she murmured. "Dr. Blackwell believed wholeheartedly in maintaining his patient's dignity." "Even at the cost of his own life?" Poirot asked quietly. She startled. Her lips parted, but no words came. Before she could answer, the bell at the front door rang sharply. Japp stiffened. "You expecting someone?" Poirot smiled faintly. I believe I am, yes." Mrs. Lila Davenport swept into the room, wearing a plum-coloured coat and a ear-gay little hat tipped at an angle that suggested both sorrow and theatrical precision. "Monsieur," she said, nodding gracefully, "I apologize for the intrusion, but I heard there were developments." Poirot observed her carefully. She had the poise of a woman accustomed to attention and adept at bending it to her advantage. "Mademoiselle Davenport," Poirot said, "you were close to Dr. Blackwell, non?" She sighed dramatically. "We were acquainted." Japp scoffed under his breath. Poirot continued, "Acquainted? In what capacity?" Her lashes fluttered innocently. He treated me for stress-induced tremors, brought on by a particularly trying theatre production last year." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. A physician of Harley Street, renowned for neurological surgery, treating tremors caused by theatrical anxiety. She stiffened. "I resent that implication." "1,000 pardons, mademoiselle," Poirot said with a polite bow. "But we must ask, were you aware Dr. Blackwell planned to operate on Lady Charlotte Ashdown?" Mrs. Davenport hesitated for the briefest of moments. Barely a heartbeat, yet enough for Poirot's sharp gaze to register it. "No," she said finally, "but I'm not surprised. He admired powerful women." Poirot smiled faintly. "Did you?" Her cheeks coloured. "If you mean, did I resent her? Certainly not. I hardly knew the woman." Poirot allowed the lie to flutter in the air, like a moth struggling in lamplight. A sudden clatter broke the tension. Nurse Vale dropped her handkerchief with a gasp, staring at the cabinet as if it were alive. Poirot turned just in time to see a sheet of paper slipping from the back of the drawer. He retrieved it. A second page. Not burned, not shredded, but misplaced. He read it silently. His expression did not change, but a gleam ignited in his eyes. "Jap," he said softly, "look." Jap leaned over. "Patient L.A., displaying uncontrollable emotional volatility, evidence of threats, warn Dr. H. and staff." He whistled. "L.A., that must be Lady Ashdown." Nurse Vale rose abruptly. "No, it can't. She would never. Lady Charlotte is fragile, not violent." Poirot folded the paper. "Fragile minds, mademoiselle, may yet harbour storms." Mrs. Davenport shook her head slowly. "But why would Lady Charlotte kill her own surgeon? Without him she cannot be healed." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Ah, that, mademoiselle, is the very question." A draught passed through the hallway, stirring the curtains. Poirot glanced at the shadows shifting against the far wall. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He moved toward the door of Dr. Blackwell's private office, gently pushing it open. The room beyond was dim, except for the pale winter light spilling across the desk. Papers lay in careful, meticulous stacks, except for one drawer left half open. Poirot knelt and pulled it further. Inside lay a small, velvet-lined box. Opened it. A scalpel rested within, gleaming, untouched by blood, and engraved with the initials L.A. Jap swore softly. A gift or a warning? Poirot straightened slowly. "It is both." He shut the box with a snap. Then he turned, eyes bright as polished steel. "My friends," he said quietly, "the killer's shadow grows longer, and soon, very soon, one more person will be in grave danger." "What person?" Jap asked. Poirot looked at the three women in turn. Nurse Vale trembling, Mrs. Davenport livid with concealed fury, and the ghost of Lady Charlotte Ashdown looming in their silences. Chapter 7. Lady Charlotte's Secret. The heavy brass knocker of Ashdown Manor fell with a sonorous thud, echoing through the frosted stillness of the estate's sweeping courtyard. Poirot stepped back, admiring the austere Georgian façade. The house, with its rows of tall, unblinking windows, seemed to watch him with the scrutiny of a witness reluctant to speak. Beside him, Inspector Jap muttered, "Place gives me the chills. And we're here to question a woman the doctor's notes suggest might be unstable. Lovely." Poirot adjusted his immaculate cuffs. "Courage, mon ami. The truth is often concealed within the hearts of the troubled. One must listen, not only to the words spoken, but those trembling at the edges of silence." The door opened. A tall, liveried footman, his face a mask carved from reserve, bowed stiffly and ushered them in. "Her ladyship awaits you in the morning room. he announced. The interior of Ashdown Manor was a world of quiet opulence. Thick carpets, marble fireplaces, portraits of ancestors brooding down from gilt frames. Yet an undercurrent of tension coiled through the air. Poirot felt it like the shift of pressure before a storm. Lady Charlotte Ashdown stood by the window when they entered. A slender woman, wrapped in an ivory shawl, her dark hair streaked with premature silver. Her hands were clasped tightly before her, knuckles pale against the embroidered fabric. Her eyes, large, luminous and ringed with shadows, turned to them with a flicker of recognition. "Monsieur Poirot," she murmured, her voice delicate as a tremor in glass. "You wish to speak of Dr. Blackwell?" Poirot bowed. "If it pleases you, milady." She inclined her head and seated herself, gesturing for them to do the same. Poirot noticed the faintest quiver in her left hand, a detail he stored carefully away. "Lady Charlotte," Poirot began gently, "you are to undergo surgery under Dr. Blackwell. Yet there exist indications that your relationship with him was troubled." The tremor in her hand halted. Slowly, she looked up. "Troubled," she repeated softly. "No, monsieur. Tragic." Japp leaned forward. "Meaning what, precisely?" She exhaled, her breath barely a whisper. "Dr. Blackwell was not merely my physician, he was my last hope. An illness of the nerves, a deterioration of the mind, they called it. My episodes of volatility." Her voice thinned with shame. "The newspapers would feast on such a word. Unstable." Poirot said nothing. Silence was his most powerful scalpel. "My late husband lost patience long ago," she continued, "but Dr. Blackwell believed I could be restored. He spoke to me as though I were not broken, but misunderstood." Poirot observed her carefully. "And yet, milady, there were warnings he issued to his staff, warnings bearing your initials." For the first time, colour touched her cheeks, faint, fleeting, but unmistakable. "Then he feared me," she whispered. Japp watched her warily. "Did he have reason to?" Her eyes widened in wounded astonishment. "I adored him. Not romantically, but with trust so profound that it frightened me. He was the only one left who believed I was more than a burden." Poirot nodded slowly. "Tell me, milady, when did you last see Dr. Blackwell?" She hesitated, glancing once toward the hallway before answering. 3 days before his death. He visited me here. We discussed the operation. I expressed doubts, fears, and he grew distant, preoccupied." "Preoccupied with what?" Poirot pressed. She closed her eyes. "I believed it was his workload. But now I wonder." Poirot allowed a pause. "Milady, one more question. Were you aware he received a gift? A scalpel engraved with your initials, L.A.? Her reaction was instantaneous, a sharp intake of breath, her hand flying to her mouth. "No!" she cried. "I would never. Who would do such a thing? Use my name to threaten him?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice low and even. "Just so. Someone wished suspicion to fall upon you." She shivered violently. "But who?" Before Poirot could answer, a soft knock interrupted them. The footman appeared in the doorway. "Lady Charlotte, Madame Davenport is here." Japp stiffened. "Davenport? The theatre woman?" Lady Charlotte nodded faintly. "She insisted on seeing me. We encountered each other at Dr. Blackwell's clinic some months ago." Poirot exchanged a quick glance with Japp. Intriguing, Mrs. Lila Davenport swept into the room. With the elegant precision of a performer, making her entrance upon a stage. Her eyes flicked briefly to Poirot, then to Lady Charlotte. A thin smile curved her lips. "My dear Lady Ashdown," she said warmly, "you look pale. I came as soon as I heard detectives were questioning you." "That was thoughtful," Lady Charlotte murmured. Poirot stood. Madame Davenport, it is interesting, is it not, that you and Lady Charlotte were both under Dr. Blackwell's care? Her smile tightened. The doctor had many patients, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, Poirot said mildly, but not all patients had cause to resent one another. Lady Charlotte looked startled. Resent? Mrs. Davenport's eyes flashed. Now see here. Poirot raised a hand. Mademoiselle, you visited the Harley Street clinic often during the same months as Lady Charlotte. You were, in fact, present on at least 2 occasions when appointments overlapped, and you expressed frustration that the doctor's time was monopolized. I never, Mrs. Davenport began, but Poirot cut in gently. You also knew, he continued, that Lady Charlotte's condition was one of prestige. Any successful surgical recovery would place Dr. Blackwell in the forefront of neurological innovation. You, mademoiselle, would not wish to lose his attention so easily. The actress's cheeks blazed with indignation. You dare suggest? Poirot bowed. I suggest nothing. I observe. Observation is the duty of Hercule Poirot. Lady Charlotte's voice trembled. Leela, did you hate that he spent time with me? Mrs. Davenport's fury fractured for a moment, revealing something raw. I hated that he pitied you. Pity is a currency he never spent on me. Poirot nodded slightly. There it was, the crack beneath the surface. But before he could continue, a sudden crash echoed from the hallway, glass shattering violently. The footman rushed in, breathless. My lady, there has been an intruder on the grounds. We saw a figure fleeing through the side garden. Poirot sprang to his feet. Jap! To the garden, feet! Lady Charlotte stood trembling, one hand against her throat. Who would come here? Why? Poirot moved past her, eyes blazing with cold clarity. Because, milady, he said, the killer fears what you might remember. Chapter 8. The Shadow in the Garden. The winter air tore at Poirot's lungs as he and Inspector Japp sprinted across the Ashdown Manor gardens, their breath clouding in white puffs that vanished into the dark hedges. The moon was veiled behind a scrim of clouds, casting the grounds in muted grey. Oaks loomed like silent sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. Somewhere ahead, a shape darted between them. There! Japp barked, boots thudding over frozen earth. By the conservatory! Poirot's stride was shorter, but relentless. His sharp gaze fixed on a figure in a long coat, slipping around the iron-framed greenhouse. A glint caught the light, something metallic in the person's hand. Japp! Poirot cried. Arrête! They are armed! The figure vanished behind the conservatory's glass structure. Japp swore and circled to cut them off. Poirot slowed at the stone steps, inhaling deeply, listening. A footfall, a second, then silence. He pressed a hand to the frosted glass. Through it, he caught a distorted shadow, still, poised like a predator. Poirot ducked aside as something small and silver struck the pane with a sharp ping, falling at his feet. A scalpel. Japp thundered in from the opposite side. Come out, you bleeding coward! Inside the conservatory, plants rustled as if a wind moved through them, though the air was breathless. Poirot eased the door, open. The humid warmth washed over him, thick with the scent of damp soil and orchids. The lanterns had been extinguished. The intruder relied on darkness. Japp! Poirot whispered. Restez! Close the exit! Japp obeyed, sealing the only visible door. Poirot stepped in, listening, not moving. He had always believed that space itself had memory, and in the soft earth he saw fresh footprints weaving between the planters. Come, mon ami, he said to the darkness. You have shown courage tonight, slipping into the manor of Lady Ashdown, but you cannot hide. A shadow shifted. Poirot turned his head just slightly. Just enough. A blur lunged behind him. But Poirot dropped, and the intruder clipped a hanging fern instead. The pot shattered against the tiles. Japp lunged forward, tackling the figure, and the three of them tumbled into the potting soil. "Hold him!" Japp growled. "I've got— Ow!" The intruder surged with surprising strength, twisting like a trapped fox. A blow caught Japp's jaw, throwing him back. Poirot seized the attacker's sleeve. There was something familiar about the fabric, the perfume clinging faintly to it. But the intruder jerked free, darted toward a side panel, and miraculously slipped through a narrow gardener's hatch hidden behind a stack of pots. Japp stumbled to his feet. "How? I didn't even know that door existed!" Poirot wiped dirt from his coat. "Our intruder knew this place well. Très bien. That tells us something." They burst out through the gardener's path just in time to see the figure vault a stone wall and disappear into the fog beyond the estate. "Gone!" Japp spat. "Vanished like smoke." Poirot nodded slowly, his chest rising and falling as he studied the wall. "No, mon ami, not vanished, only delayed. We have touched the edge of the truth." They returned to the manor, their shoes leaving muddy tracks through the polished floors. Lady Charlotte stood trembling in the entrance hall, Mrs. Davenport behind her, eyes bright with something between fear and calculation. "Did you catch him?" Lady Charlotte whispered. Poirot shook his head. "No, milady, but we learned more than you think." Mrs. Davenport scoffed. "Nonsense! You chased a trespasser and came back with nothing." Poirot's eyes half-lidded. "But you are wrong, madame. Our intruder used a gardener's hatch, one known only to staff or to visitors with familiarity of the estate." Lady Charlotte blinked in confusion. "But few people know of that door. Even I forget it exists." Mrs. Davenport stiffened for a fraction of a second. Poirot noticed. "Lady Charlotte," he said gently, "this intruder, I fear they returned to prevent you from revealing something you do not yet realize you know." Lady Charlotte pressed a trembling hand to her temple. I hardly remember the last conversation I had with Dr. Blackwell, only that he looked frightened. "Far frightened," Japp repeated. "By what?" Lady Charlotte sank onto a velvet chair. "He warned me that someone in his clinic posed a danger, someone he trusted once." Poirot leaned forward. "Milady, did he name this person?" "No, he began to, but then he seemed to think better of it." Mrs. Davenport's voice cut through the tension. "This is all absurd. Anyone could have slipped onto the grounds. A thief, a vagrant." "Madame," Poirot said softly, "your concern is most interesting. You insisted on coming tonight, yet the timing of the intruder's appearance aligns curiously with your arrival." Her eyes flared. "Are you accusing me?" "Non," Poirot replied. "I am merely observing patterns. You are familiar with Dr. Blackwell's schedule. You often waited outside his office. You saw Lady Charlotte's appointments. You even knew her condition." "Everyone knew her condition," Mrs. Davenport snapped. "The gossip sheets whispered about it for months." "Ah," Poirot said, his moustache twitching, "but gossip does not mention private clinic discussions or surgical plans." Mrs. Davenport's lips parted, then closed sharply. Poirot turned to Lady Charlotte. "Milady, there is more. You knew of a conflict between Dr. Blackwell and another, someone whose ambitions challenged his own." Lady Charlotte's breath hitched. "Conflict? Yes, there was something. He said someone accused him of taking too much credit, of overshadowing them." Japp frowned. "Who? A colleague? A rival surgeon?" Lady Charlotte shook her head slowly. "Not a colleague. A former protégé." Poirot rose, the final pieces sliding into place. "A protégé," he murmured. "One with talent and resentment, one who visited often, and whose presence tonight was no coincidence. Mrs. Davenport stumbled back a step. Poirot's eyes, sharp, glinting, fixed upon her. But he did not speak her name, not yet. Instead he said, "The killer grows bolder, and now they are afraid. That means, my friends." He turned toward the darkened windows, the fog curling against the glass like a waiting hand. We are close enough to breathe upon the truth. Chapter 9. The Protégé's Betrayal. Dawn broke reluctantly over London, its pale light filtering through the mist like a secret unwilling to be spoken. Poirot and Inspector Japp walked briskly along Harley Street, the city stirring awake with the muted clatter of carriage wheels and distant chimneys breathing smoke into the winter air. The clinic loomed ahead, stern, immaculate, and still holding its silence like a sealed vault. Japp rubbed his jaw, still sore from the intruder's strike. "Right, Poirot. You dragged me out of bed with talk of revelations. What exactly have you pieced together?" Poirot paused at the clinic's entrance, his gloved hand on the brass handle. "Mon ami, sometimes the truth does not shout. It whispers. Last night in the conservatory, I recognized a perfume, jasmine and white cedar. A fragrance worn only by one person we have encountered. Mrs. Davenport." Poirot shook his head. "No, she wears sandalwood. The fragrance I detected belongs to someone else entirely." Japp frowned. "Then who?" Poirot opened the door. "We shall let them tell us themselves." Inside, the clinic was unnervingly quiet. The receptionist, Miss Pembroke, sat at her desk sorting files. She looked up sharply as they entered. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, Inspector. I didn't expect you so early." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, I must speak with all remaining staff. There are matters of great urgency." Her fingers faltered over the papers. "Oh, of course. Dr. Keene is already in his office. I'll inform the nurses." "Merci." As she hurried off, Japp leaned close. "Keene, eh? The junior surgeon?" Poirot's eyes glittered. "But of course." Japp blinked. "You think he's the protégé? The one Lady Charlotte mentioned?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Think? No, mon ami, I know." They approached Dr. Keene's office. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of lamplight cutting across the corridor floor. Poirot knocked. "Enter," came a cool, steady voice. Dr. Evan Keene sat at his desk reviewing charts. His blonde hair was neatly combed, his spectacles gleaming. His youth, perhaps early 30s, gave him an air of earnest ambition, though something in his expression had hardened since their last meeting. "Gentlemen," he said, folding his hands, "how may I assist you?" Poirot closed the door behind them. "Dr. Keene, we have questions regarding your relationship with Dr. Blackwell." A shadow crossed his features. "I assumed as much." Poirot studied him carefully. "Tell me, Doctor, were you close to him?" Keene hesitated. "Close? I trained under him. He was a mentor, yes. But these last months our professional dynamics shifted. He questioned my techniques, ridiculed my proposals for surgical innovation." Japp raised an eyebrow. "Conflict, then?" Keene's jaw tightened. "Healthy disagreement, nothing more." Poirot's gaze fell upon a small desk drawer, slightly open. Inside, he glimpsed a glint of silver. A surgical instrument. Poirot approached with unhurried grace. "May I?" Keene rose abruptly. "That drawer contains personal tools. I would prefer you." Poirot opened it in one swift movement. Inside lay a scalpel, identical to the one thrown in the conservatory. Japp's hand flew toward his cuffs. "Right, Keene, explain this." Keene's face blanched. "Inspector, please, there are dozens of scalpels in this clinic. That does not mean—" Poirot lifted a finger. "But this one is engraved." He turned the blade. E.K. Keene swallowed hard. That was a gift from Dr. Blackwell, years ago. It's hardly incriminating." Poirot nodded slowly. "No, not by itself, but the gardener's hatch at Ashdown Manor. You knew it existed." Keene stiffened. "What? How could I—" "Because," Poirot said gently, "you performed a consultation there. 6 months ago. Lady Charlotte's husband insisted upon privacy. You walked through the garden. You saw the hatch." Keene's eyes darted left, calculating, cornered. Poirot pressed on. "And the perfume I smelled in the conservatory? Jasmine and white cedar. A blend worn by precisely one person in this case." He tilted his head. "You." Keene inhaled sharply. "That proves nothing." "Perhaps," Poirot allowed, "but this does." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded sheet. An appointment ledger Miss Pembroke had given him an hour earlier. "Your name appears next to Lady Charlotte's appointments, more often than coincidence would permit. You were present at the clinic far more frequently than your assigned shifts. And you argued with Dr. Blackwell the very morning of his murder." Keene's composure cracked. "We disagreed, yes, but not about Lady Charlotte, about my research." Poirot stepped closer. Dr. Blackwell accused you of recklessness, of endangering patients. He refused to endorse your surgical proposals, and thus your ambition, your pride, was wounded." Keene's hands clenched. "You don't understand. Blackwell was holding the field back. My technique could revolutionize neurosurgery." Poirot shook his head. "Or kill dozens. He sought to protect the vulnerable, and you, mon cher, sought glory." A tremor ran through Keene's voice. "He humiliated me, in front of the board. Said I was too inexperienced, too impulsive, that my hands were not ready." "Were they?" Poirot whispered. Silence. For a moment, something fragile flickered in Keene's eyes, an admission struggling to be borne. Then he collapsed into his chair. "He ruined me. Everything I worked for, years of study, sacrifice. He blocked every proposal, every paper. He wanted me small." Japp stepped forward. "So you killed him." Keene's head snapped up. "No!" His denial was raw, almost desperate. "I confronted him, yes. I told him he was wrong, but I didn't harm him. I left before noon, and I can prove it. I performed a surgery at St. Aldwyn's Hospital at 1 o'clock. The entire staff can confirm it." Poirot stilled. Japp froze mid-step. "An alibi," Poirot murmured. "An unshakable one," Keene said. Poirot closed the drawer carefully. "Then the intruder at Ashdown Manor was not you." Keene shook his head fiercely. "I swear it." Poirot turned away, his mind racing, calculating, reconfiguring the puzzle. "Dr. Keene," he said at last, "you are ambitious, but not a murderer." Keene sagged with relief, mixed with astonishment. Japp exhaled. "If he's not our man, then who?" Poirot opened the office door. "Someone," he said quietly, "who hides not behind ambition, but behind grief, or jealousy, or love twisted into something unrecognizable." He paused. "Dr. Keene, one final question. Who knew best the layout of both the clinic and Ashdown Manor?" Keene's eyes widened. "There is only one person," he whispered, "one who visited both often." Poirot nodded slowly. "Oui, doctor, the time has come." He stepped into the corridor, his voice cold as steel. "We must speak again with Mrs. Davenport." Chapter 10. The Scalpel's Truth. The drawing-room of Ashdown Manor was silent, save for the crackling of the fire. Poirot stood before Lady Charlotte Ashdown, Mrs. Lila Davenport, and Nurse Edith Vale, each seated with careful restraint, their faces a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Inspector Japp leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, awaiting the inevitable revelation. Poirot adjusted his gloves and cleared his throat. His eyes, small and precise, swept across each individual with the precision of a scalpel. "Mes amis," We have arrived at the final act. The time has come for the truth." Mrs. Davenport's hands trembled. "I suppose you've solved it, Monsieur Poirot. You always do." Poirot inclined his head, his moustaches twitching with satisfaction. "Indeed. The events of recent nights, the intruder in the garden, the stolen documents, the stolen scalpel, all point in one direction." He paused, letting the suspense curl like smoke through the room. "Dr. Blackwell," Poirot continued, "was a man of great skill, yes, but also a man of enemies. The intruder who sought to frighten Lady Charlotte, to manipulate and conceal evidence, was not motivated by ambition, nor by revenge for professional slight. No, the culprit was motivated by something far simpler and far more dangerous." He turned to Mrs. Davenport. "Madame, you insisted upon visiting Lady Charlotte at the precise moment when the intruder appeared. You claimed it was coincidence, yet the timing was impeccable." Mrs. Davenport's eyes narrowed. "Monsieur Poirot, you cannot—" Poirot lifted a finger. "Ah, but I can. Your presence is not mere coincidence. You were aware of the gardener's hatch. You knew the layout of Ashdown Manor intimately because, months prior, you had gained access during rehearsals for a play at the nearby theatre. You watched Dr. Blackwell's routine. You knew his visits to Lady Charlotte." Her lips parted, a flash of anger and fear crossing her face. I did not harm him." Poirot smiled faintly. "No, not directly. But you did attempt to frighten Lady Charlotte, did you not? The intruder in the garden, your perfume betrayed you. Jasmine and white cedar, subtle, yet distinct. You intended to divert suspicion, to make others believe Lady Charlotte or her circle were involved. You sought to manipulate the investigation." Mrs. Davenport drew a shaky breath. Yes, I frightened her. But I did not kill him. I only wanted to protect myself and my position." Poirot's gaze softened slightly. "Ah, the human heart, madame. It is capable of great ingenuity and terrible misjudgment." He turned toward Nurse Edith Vale. "Mademoiselle, your loyalty to Dr. Blackwell was unwavering. You observed more than anyone suspected. You knew of the threats he received, and yet you could not prevent them." The nurse's hands shook. "I tried, but I feared for him. I did not know who to trust." Poirot nodded. "Exactly, and that brings us to the true murderer." The room held its breath. Poirot walked slowly to the fireplace and picked up the charred fragments of Dr. Blackwell's notes. The one person who had both opportunity and knowledge, who could enter the clinic without suspicion, who had access to Ashdown Manor, who knew of Lady Charlotte's appointments, and who could manipulate the events to cast blame elsewhere. His gaze fell upon Lady Charlotte. The room stiffened. "Milady?" Japp asked cautiously. Poirot's small eyes met hers. "Dr. Blackwell trusted you implicitly, but you knew of his discoveries, his refusal to allow your treatment to be delayed. You feared exposure of your instability. The notes you destroyed, the confrontation you arranged, and the subtle coercion of those around you, all were calculated." Lady Charlotte gasped. "No, I loved him. I would never— Poirot raised a hand gently. "You acted in fear, yes, and perhaps desperation, but the actual act, the fatal act, was unintended. You did not strike him with your own hands, but your decisions created the circumstances in which the fatal accident occurred." Mrs. Davenport gasped. "Accident? You mean—" Poirot nodded. "Yes. The locked door, the papers, the night Dr. Blackwell confronted the intruder. You see, the true fatal action was orchestrated by an unanticipated movement. A misstep during a struggle with your hired intruder allowed him to fall upon his scalpel." Japp blinked. "So it wasn't murder?" Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Not in the strict sense. It was a tragedy caused by fear, secrecy, and misjudgment. Human emotion is as sharp a scalpel as any steel. Lady Charlotte covered her face, shaking. I only wanted to survive, to be restored, to live. I never wished for his death. Poirot stepped closer. I believe you, milady, and I believe your grief is sincere. But you must understand, your actions, though indirect, carried consequences. Mrs. Davenport, pale, whispered, So all my scheming, it was futile. Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, fear and jealousy often mislead the most clever minds. Hastings, who had arrived quietly behind the group, stepped forward. Poirot, does that mean everyone is safe now? Poirot turned, eyes scanning each face. The immediate danger is past. The intruder has been identified, the protégé cleared, and Lady Charlotte's intentions revealed. Justice is nuanced. Sometimes it is a matter of truth being known, rather than punishment administered. Japp exhaled. I'll say, a murder that was only a near murder. Twisted lot, these people. Poirot's gaze softened on Lady Charlotte. The mind must learn, milady, that even in secrecy, the truth finds a way. You will survive, yes, but let this be a lesson in transparency and caution. Fear and concealment are deadly companions. Lady Charlotte nodded slowly, tears glistening. I understand, Monsieur Poirot. I am grateful you saw the truth. Poirot's moustaches twitched in satisfaction. And I am gratified, mes amis, that the threads have been untangled. The scalpel, the notes, the shadows, all have revealed themselves in time. Japp rubbed his eyes. I don't know about all that, Poirot. I just know this has been the strangest case I've ever seen. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, mon ami, that is why we live for the hunt, because the human heart with all its secrets is the most mysterious of puzzles. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the walls, as Harley Street and Ashdown Manor began to awaken to the new day. The tragedy, the suspense, the fear all resolved, leaving only reflection and a profound sense of relief. Poirot turned to the group one final time. Mes amis, the case is concluded, the truth is known, and now we may rest, having uncovered the intricate patterns of human frailty and fear. Lady Charlotte exhaled, faintly smiling through her tears. Mrs. Davenport sank into a chair, defeated but unharmed. Nurse Vale wiped her eyes, relieved that the danger had passed. And Japp, ever pragmatic, muttered, Let's hope no more surprises, eh, Poirot? Poirot's small eyes twinkled. Ah, Inspector, one can never be certain. But today the puzzle has spoken. And the heart of Harley Street remains, as ever, a place of secrets and revelations.